Hey gangs, welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel, and today we are back in the world of Hearthstone 4 and back playing the Russia Reworked mod. And today we're gonna go down the path of the third Rome, which is quite an interesting path, I think. At least it's relatively unique. Obviously there's this whole claim, whether you actually believe this claim or not is up to you, but there's this whole claim that Russia presents the sort of third sphere of Rome. The first Roman Empire was obviously the Roman Empire. The second Roman Empire was the Eastern Roman Empire after the West fell in the 5th century, and up until the 15th century, obviously the Eastern Roman Empire presented the second Rome, and Russia within this belief system or this claim presents the third Rome, which is a claim that a lot of people believe and a lot of people are really skeptical about when it comes to the actual historical relevancy of something like this. But through essentially the continuation of the Orthodox Church and everything like that, a lot of the claims could potentially be made. I mean, the Tsars even called themselves the Tsars, which obviously just means the Emperor, which is a title that is famously originated when it comes to the European sphere from the Roman Empire and everything like that. There's a lot to this claim. If you want to do some research on it, I would definitely advise you to, because it's kind of interesting. At least a lot of people have claimed this mantle, and because obviously a lot of people are Orthodox, and a lot of people then continued on within the same territories of for example, the Second Roman Empire, and a lot of people have continued when it comes to the territories of the First Roman Empire. So there's a lot to it, a lot of claims, but obviously one of them is that Russia presents the third Rome, or the third Roman Empire, the third sort of establishment of Rome, you could say. And I find this kind of interesting because this mod, obviously, gives us a focus tree path that allows us to recreate the third Rome, but for that we obviously have to again go through this whole Second Russian Civil War thing that we've already gone through when it comes to the Slavic Empire video, and I'm looking at the description because I really like this mod. It gives Russia so much flavor, so many opportunities, not just with the Stalin path, but obviously with the non-historical path. There's a lot to go through, and I really like that because, for example, when it comes to this third Rome path, you obviously have to go fascist to do that, but fascism also allows you to go down a very different path with very different focuses and a different sort of storytelling aspect to it. And I really like this storytelling aspect of this focus tree and this mod in general, and the individual paths that it gives you. That's something that's a little bit lacking in some focus trees. For example, when it comes to Greece and Bulgaria and Turkey and even Spain to a certain degree and France, you do have this storytelling aspect to it. But for example, when it comes to like Britain or the United States, when it comes to the historical path, or I don't know, like Poland, some of the earlier focus trees, they really sorely lack some of this like story elements that are they aren't necessarily all that gameplay affecting. I mean, to a certain degree they are, because maybe you're really interested in this story of this alternate story path or something like that, the story of the nation or the country itself and everything like that. And if you're really interested in it, it might make you roleplay a little bit more, and that might be a little bit more interesting for you. I mean, it's just more interesting, gives you more flavor when you're playing the game. It's not just 5 more civilian factories, 5 more military factories. The Italian focus tree is actually a very good example of just very big missed opportunities when it comes to storytelling. Because, for example, even the vanilla Soviet focus tree gives you the sort of anti-capitalist or the anti-access policies, and then you can roleplay which is more important to you and everything like that. But for example, if you have the Berlin-Moscow axis active, then obviously you would want to go down the anti-capitalist policy. But the Italian tree, you can't necessarily do that, because both the Italy first and the axis trees, just have the same war goals, they have the same stuff going on. You have the Mare Nostrum and everything like that, but it's all the same. So I really adore this mod because it gives so much flavor to the Soviet Union, which is a nation that was sorely lacking all this flavor. And while I'm talking to you, obviously you can see on the screen that we are doing again the focuses that give us a lot of industry, a lot of stolen guns, everything like that. If you've seen the first Russia Reworked video, again linked in the description, you know exactly what's going on here, because obviously there's the second civil war coming and we have to prepare for it, and we're going to prepare for it by just relocating a lot of industry, stealing a lot of guns, buying a lot of foreign guns, training a lot of infantry and just divisions in general. But we're not going to release any nations that might be helpful in this cause. We're not going to do any of that because we want to grind our generals. We want to grind our generals, and what is really interesting about the fascist path is that some of the best generals are locked within the Tsarist or the non-aligned, or basically the military junta path that we did last time. Those generals are not aligned with the fascists. They really don't like them. Even historically they weren't really aligned. Some of them were, but a majority of them weren't. We do get to retain those that actually were. But those that weren't, they're just, they just disappear. And I really like that as well, because it makes you think ahead a little bit. It makes you plan as to, like, which generals am I going to pick? Those obviously want to pick those that are going to remain, but those are not the best generals. So how do you prepare for this? Maybe you prepare by releasing a few more countries, or you prepare just by, submitting that, okay, we're gonna have a little bit of a worse industry, or the civil war is gonna be a bit harder, or maybe you go into, you save your political power and immediately take some advisors or the military staff that give you bonuses when it comes to the army and everything like that. So it's again, this mod is great when it comes to this sort of stuff. It makes you plan. It seems so epic when I describe it, but obviously we're just clicking buttons here. We're just relocating civilian factories and military factories. Ultimately, like for example, if you release Belarus, it costs only 25, 25 political power, but it dies almost immediately. If you really want to get some of the better released nations, for example, the Ukraine is probably the best one, but it's the most expensive as well. But they do have the best military, so it's kind of like, like what do you do in that sort of situation? Do you back political power before you go into the civil war? You don't necessarily want to do that, because then the Red Army might be really strong when you face them. Or do you just release all of them and forget about the civilian factories? Well, then your country is gonna be a bit behind. Another thing I forgot to mention is that I actually set Germany to go down the Restore the Kaiser path, because, well, I think it would be a little bit too overpowered if we actually went as a fascist nation and Germany was still fascist. We could just join them and dominate everyone, and the Kaiserreich Germany, or the Kaiser Germany, the German Empire essentially always goes against Russia or the Soviet Union. It's not like they have a choice, really. It's in the focus tree. So it's I do think that this will make the the overall experience a little bit better, just enough to not bore us to death, essentially. And here we go, skipping ahead a little bit. Here's basically the split between the territories that remain within the Soviet sphere and those that are given to us. It's a little bit of a shame that we don't spawn with pure infantry. We do actually have a lot of tanks, or a lot of tank divisions, and a lot of, like motorized divisions and cavalry. It wouldn't be wise, I don't think, to switch them all just to infantry. It might be a little bit interesting, but I do think that we'd be sort of at a major disadvantage if we actually do that. So we have to balance the budget, or just balance the industry a little bit. I did end up going with a decent general here. I hope he's actually decent, because some of them, they have good stats, but because they have like no other meaningful traits, they get like completely annihilated whenever you actually try to do anything. That's just how this game works. And so yeah, hopefully it'll be fine. But it's basically the same strategy as last time. So yeah, we should be seeing the. Actually, what I did might be a smart move. I relocated almost all of the Soviet divisions just on the border with Poland, so maybe it takes them a little longer to actually get here. That might be actually a little interesting. I don't see many of them here, but oh, they actually went here. So, well, you know the thing.
Cheeki, Breeki, Vtuber, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, Oscar, Shooter, Shooter, Color, Cheeki, Breeki, Vtuber, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, Oscar, Shooter, Shooter, Color, Cheeki, Breeki, Vtuber, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, Oscar, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, Oscar, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, was ja, ja, blitzer, Hardbass, Oscar,
There we go. The Civil War is over. It was a bit of a harsher one, I do think. One thing that was a little bit annoying was that my general kept getting sick or injured or everything like that. It's obviously understandable because, well, the climates in these regions can vary quite widely, and because I'm using the unlimited or nearly unlimited divisions per general, it basically affects individual generals quite a lot. For example, because he is effectively fighting both in a desert at the same time, and in some instances both in a desert and in the Arctic territory, so he can get sick. He can get a cold and he can get a heat stroke at the same time, and as well because he has so many generals, almost 100 essentially, 95, he can get injured. Well, I think like it's 5 times more probable that he gets injured or something like that. I'm sure there's a whole lot of calculations going on behind the scenes, but the one particular general that we picked at the beginning, he kept getting injured like almost immediately every time I just picked him, so that was a little bit annoying. But now essentially all we have to do is just rebuild, rebuild, and that's all that necessarily matters here. But yeah, it's essentially the same situation. We don't necessarily have to do don't necessarily have anything much to do before we really switch ideologies, and even then it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll immediately get to do a lot of stuff. This mod actually accounts for that sort of stuff, because the Soviet Union in vanilla, I mean, as long as you know what you're doing, you can almost immediately, day one, well, after you bank a bit of political power, you can take over Poland, Romania and Turkey, basically almost immediately, and that negates, well, basically any challenge, because, well, you immediately border Germany and you can just take them out the minute that they get into a war with the Western powers. You can just take them out almost immediately. You're basically almost the first one to take them out, because once they request the Sudetenland, you can just say no, and then they just get a war goal on you. They always go to war with you, because that's just how the AI works. And then, you know, you're suddenly in a conflict that that's obviously extremely advantageous for you, and you just completely annihilate them. And so yeah, I really like that this mod actually does account for sort of the overpowered nature of the Soviet Union or of Russia, with sort of a more aggressive, there we go, sort of a more aggressive ideology. I really like that this mod actually does account for all of that, and does try to nerf you, even if you are picking quite a bit of quite an aggressive ideology. However, what it doesn't account for is for you having just insanely strong generals after the Civil War. I can't really stress this enough. Your generals become incredible beasts because you're fighting essentially with a lot of divisions. Even if you obviously even if you split those divisions up between 24 into the 24 limit generals equally, and just fight with the with sort of the field marshal front, or the field marshal frontline order, still your generals just become insanely strong. Sort of the same scenario as when you're fighting within the Spanish Civil War. Again, it's yeah, we're not gonna support the Chinese, not at all, but yeah, your generals just become insane. And so yeah, even though they try to nerf you, you're still extremely overpowered. And so, but basically only through modifiers, because you won the Civil War. Obviously, the Civil War experience means that your generals are just better, and yeah, your generals are pretty decent anyway. So that's actually kind of cool. And here we go, we are about to switch ideologies in a night at the Manchurian border. Quite an interesting one, because obviously Konstantin Rodzavetsky was in Manchuria. I think he was later in Japan. He's a very interesting guy. Well, interesting, and sort of a relative term. His life story is relatively interesting, and obviously this mod makes him, once you go down obviously the specific focus tree path, the story of his life isn't exactly in this in sort of the description this mod gives the guy. It's not exactly the same, because obviously, you know, this is an alternate reality, quote unquote, but I think initially he's actually quite an interesting leader, because you get so many debuffs initially once you pick this path. You know, he isn't really a great country leader, as opposed to, for example, the White Guard or the Tsar or anything like that. He's quite he has well, you can obviously go immediately to more economy, but he isn't all that great. As you can see, he does give you quite a lot of debuffs, which while they aren't, well, all that important, but it's not like you have continuously decreasing, I don't know, like stability or anything like that. But he's not the greatest, and so I do like that they also try to debuff you a little bit with this sort of move. They also give you a lot of theoretical political instability, but we are immediately going to try and get some of these wayward powers that are relatively close to our, I can't really do Romania yet, some of the powers that may end up in a war or in a conflict with the German Empire. We just try to get them on side, because I do have a suspicion that the German Empire is not going to be extremely happy with us. There we go, Bulgaria. Because the AI can't necessarily choose this, but they always end up going up against the Soviets. I'm not entirely sure if the mod accounts for this, or if somehow the mod changes this or not, because since they always have the sort of the build up against Russia and the bulwark against Bolshevism, I'm not entirely sure how that changes. I'm really interested. I'd be really interested to see, for example, how it would change if, or in a future, you know, path, or in a future sort of DLC, maybe, when inevitably Paradox releases an update for the Russian or the Soviet focus tree path, how they would change that once the USSR switches ideology. For example, it's very similar to how communist Spain plays out, because if you just want to go down the default communist path for Spain, it makes you extremely tied to the USSR, and if the USSR is not communist, and how does that work out, right? Because you'd be a communist puppet, and you have to, you know, you're choosing to be a communist. For example, while you become really dependent and reliant on, I don't know, like non-aligned power, right? And that's kind of interesting, actually. That's really interesting. So maybe you'd be unable to become communist Spain in that regard at that point. It's there's a lot of considerations at that moment. So it's a lot of focuses for a lot of countries are sort of dependent on the USSR being communist, right? It's kind of strange. For example, if I don't know, if you go, if they inevitably change the USSR and they make them go fascist, how would that change the AI of just default historical Germany? Would they then go with the Berlin Axis alliance more? Would Italy, try to join the Allies or something? It's because that's basically the most overpowered alliance in the entire game. Even more overpowered theoretically than the United States going fascist and then basically joining the Axis, because Russia can build up to the industrial might of the United States. However, they have more manpower, so if it ever comes down to being sort of a grindy war, the USSR is just better, right? It's really quite an interesting question, and it's going to be interesting to see what Paradox actually does with it. But when it comes to the actual gameplay, right now we don't necessarily have much of any kind of action to do. We're just taking focuses and rebuilding, obviously, because we're still kind of recovering from the Civil War. Obviously, our industrial power isn't up to par if as compared to if we were not to go through a Civil War. This mod actually does account for that and gives Stalin. See, there we go, he resigns. As I talked about earlier, a lot of the white generals that disagree with the current political situation that we are in right now, they just resign. And I actually like that, again, because it makes you sort of consider which generals you actually want to pick and choose, or maybe you sort of go with the white generals anyway because they're actually really good. Some of the white generals anyway because they're actually really good, but maybe you just then leave them out. Whatever. We're just gonna use them for the Civil War, and then even though we lose really powerful generals, doesn't matter. It's gonna make the Civil War a bit quicker, a bit faster. Just get through it a little bit better, and then just whatever. We're just gonna leave those generals anyway. We're gonna focus more, maybe, I don't know, the industrial side or something like that. So you have to balance these things out. I actually really like mods that make you think about these things a tiny bit, as well as obviously giving the country a bit of a story and everything like that. There we go, the Russian state announces a third Rome ambitions. Finally some action. You haven't really missed much. I skipped over quite a bit, but the only thing we really did was build up a whole bunch and create a faction and invite Afghanistan and Iran to it, and yeah, now we can do the third Rome ambition decisions, which aren't actually all that unique initially, because you basically there we go, integrating Tentative and everything like that. Next up is Mongolia. Hopefully they accept. But what's important is that you do actually gain a lot of cores from this, and that's really strong. Obviously, it's really strong. But the balancing factor, obviously, is that it takes until like 1941 before you can actually do anything. Here we go. Mongolia accepts, and I do think they should be core territory, right? Yeah, I do think so. I had some divisions here, but looks like we won't be needing them. Looks like they can stay on the course and just go and fortify the eastern part of our nation. And yeah, so next up, I suppose we could do the alliance with the Japanese, but maybe just more industry, actually. I'm not entirely sure. There's so many industrial options when it comes to this focus tree. It's like you can do industry, you can do industry here, you can do industry there. It's really nice how you can just plan ahead. For example, if you expect to, get smashed by, I don't know, like the Germans initially, you can just fortify, or you can just build up Siberia and rely on that sort of territory there that you have, instead of maybe building up, I don't know, eastern Poland, which is probably going to get attacked. But since we do have that decision to go after Finland, it's but yeah, the Germans are actually going after the Western power, so maybe we wait until they tire themselves out against the West and then strike against them? I don't know. It's do still have that non-aggression, so it's going to be quite an interesting situation that we got ourselves into. The Germans never actually really went against us at all. Sort of expected them to at least, I don't know, get a war goal or something against us, but nothing yet. So it looks like we'll have to be the ones to start shenanigans around here, and yeah, just as usual, it's always up to the Russians. The game just gave me a war goal against Yugoslavia for some reason. This is a little bit strange. I mean, I don't necessarily like Yugoslavia. That's a bit random, right? Maybe it has to do something with them switching. Actually, you know what? It's probably because they switched their government, or more rather, they switched their king. Yeah, Peter II came into power. Even though he's still, still a Regency Council, I do believe. Yeah, I do think it should be something like that. But yeah, and because it does give, I do think the Axis a war goal, and because now we are sort of the default European Axis alliance, and we are the head of that alliance. We gain a war goal against them. It's kind of nice how dynamic those things are. It's nice how, you know, Hearts of Iron is just dynamic that way. But it does mean that we get to take over Romania and Yugoslavia at the same time. So let's use this war goal. Actually, it's quite random. Wasn't really expecting to go to this, you know, into the Balkans this early, but or this early at this point in time. So yeah, let's just go. I mean, why not? We already want Bessarabia anyway, right? So yeah, let's just get into it. Looks like the Finnish war is gonna have to wait a little bit. Do also have a lot of claims on Poland, so that war against Germany is gonna be basically inevitable. Because no. That's kind of strange. No real claims on Italy, but a lot of claims on... yeah, I understand. So, it's we do gain claims on former Eastern Roman territory, but not Western Roman territory, because we're sort of inheriting the legacy not of the entirety of Rome, but of Eastern Rome or Byzantium. So, yeah, actually, it's sort of a unification of Roman of the claims of Byzantium, so sort of the core territory and the claims that the Greeks get once you finish up with their whole Byzantium thing, plus the claims of just, you know, of just the Russian Empire. That's really that's a lot of claim territory we can get. That's a lot of very quick war goals we can get, and permanent war goals at that, because claimed war goals, when it comes to cores and claims, they don't actually go away at all. So we can just get very quick war goals, and that lasts for an eternity. And looks like Romania is going to be the first one to actually get the axe. Well, Ternatuva and Mongolia were the first, but they didn't actually, you know, put up a fight at all. So yeah, and Yugoslavia is going to be second. So yeah, we can okay, we can integrate them. So that's actually kind of cool that you just annex them and then you conquer it. That war goal against Yugoslavia became really important for some reason. I suppose that's because we switched the ideology of Germany, so actually it worked in our favor, even though I thought it would be actually a little bit more difficult this way, because the entire sort of central power, yeah, it's a core state, but we still get resistance. That's a bit strange. I suppose it's kind of a bug, I guess, whatever. But yeah, I thought it was actually going to be a big hindrance. The fact that we are now basically facing up the Central Powers in combination with the whole German anti-Soviet pact thing, or anti-Comintern pact. Actually, it's like anti-Soviet pact. I do remember it being called something like that. A lot of chugging in this game, a lot of lag. Yeah, I guess, yeah, the Germans went up against the West. So yeah, it's kind of a strange one, this game, but it's actually kind of interesting. You know, it's kind of strange but interesting at the same time. I suppose switching ideologies of the two like biggest players in Central and Eastern Europe does mix things up a bit. I don't even know if Yugoslavia can get called into into the German alliance. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think so. I do know that the entirety of the Baltic, Finland refuses. Well, I guess well, Finland's next on the chopping block, but this does mean that we're going up against Germany as well. So it's yep, they break the agreement. How terrible. They broke the agreement. Yeah, it definitely wasn't us that initiated war. No, they broke the agreement. And that's definitely the case here. And nothing suspicious at all that we were the ones to initiate everything. But wait, actually Finland broke the agreement because all we wanted was to peacefully integrate those territories. Not violently, not through or no, peacefully. And so obviously the Western powers are now our allies. This is so strange. But yeah, let's go up against Poland because they still haven't been called in. And all of a sudden this Yugoslavian territory here might actually prove to be very useful. Very useful because we could potentially take out Austria-Hungary from there whenever they form, because obviously the German Empire focus tree in the area always goes down that specific focus tree path where they go up against the West and rekindle imperial sentiment within Austria-Hungary. So I don't know. I guess we just take them out whenever we do take them out. It's going to be kind of an interesting situation there. But maybe we could potentially actually get Hungary as an ally because they are fascist. But because Germany did rekindle the imperial sentiment, they're just gonna switch anyway. So it's yeah, this is quite a strange game. But hey, it's a game where we bring back or we create the third Rome. So obviously it's gonna be a bit wild, isn't it? And of course Bulgaria joins because the southern front wasn't annoying enough, so now we have to face up against Bulgaria as well. There we go, might as well just, I mean, we have almost 300 divisions, so it doesn't actually matter all that much. Bulgaria basically just signed its death warrant, but all fronts are actually going fairly nicely. This Baltic line, I suppose we can use them to man the Bulgarian front of their like 5 divisions or whatever. The Bulgarians really don't have a lot of troops until like 1945 or something. Even if you're playing as them, you can't necessarily have a very big army unless you exploit the game a tiny whiny bit, and the Bulgarian focus tree actually does allow for a lot of exploiting. But for that you actually have to be in the Axis, and well, we are effectively the Axis right now, so they're definitely not in the Axis, not in the Russian Accords, and that's just a big ol' no-go. But they're not even fash actually, so they can't. I don't think they would be able to go into the Axis. I mean, they can be if they're Tsarist or just non-aligned. So, but yeah, you know, justification against Poland is finished. So let's actually try how far we can push with these divisions, because it might be more effective than not. Because all the Germans are basically on the Western Front right now, right? So. But they're at war with us as well. I haven't really seen any activity from them, so it might be actually more effective than not. Actually, I'm more worried about this Bulgarian thing right now, because that could be really annoying. If they encircle us there, you know, they have against northern Transylvania or against Hungary effectively, that could be really bad. It could really suck. But of course, you know, all of the Baltic is now in, except for Latvia, and Estonia usually never joins any wars. Neither does Latvia, which is actually quite interesting. Like these two, they join the alliance, whether it be the Polish alliance or the Central Powers or even the Axis or whatever. They always join the alliances. Never actually join any wars unless they're basically, you know, targeted. Unless you declare war against them, they never join any wars. Maybe that's sort of an AI thing. Might as well just go up against Greece as well, just to completely dominate the Balkans. And then at a later point we might go up against Turkey as well. Just, you know, just destroy them all in one very quick swoop while we have like 2 armies there. And, okay, Bulgaria called them Poland even though we're already at war. So, fighting quite a lot of people here right now, but I suppose we have to, because you never know when the allies might beat Germany and just guarantee these guys, and that really wouldn't be all that great. So the Germans actually haven't pushed that much in the west, which is kind of interesting. Do we? I suppose we do. I don't know, actually. I mean, once we get into Germany, maybe? Kind of a strange position. Because the Hungarian situation is going to be kind of interesting. Because if they join the Central Powers right away, which I'm not entirely sure if they actually do. I know that if you voluntarily switch to Austria-Hungary as Hungary through your focus tree, and Germany does go down the German Empire path, I know you can basically almost immediately join the Central Powers. But if it's through the rekindle imperial sentiment path, not entirely sure, because sometimes, for example, Austria forms, or even Czechoslovakia just forms Austria-Hungary at that point, or / the Danubian Federation, and at that point I don't think you can't immediately just make them join the Central Power. So it depends on whether the Germans are the ones doing it, or when the Yugoslavians can actually. They're putting up such a hefty fight here. Yeah, let's just do this thing. Might as well. Why not? It's just, you know, dominate the whole thing in one very quick offensive. The Turks, not yet. I'm not entirely sure if I'm completely ready for that, but yeah, let's just all seems to be fairly decent right now. Let's just take them out. Here we go. Austria-Hungary reformed, and they are Sweden. Okay, well, Austria. So it looks like I actually called Hungary into my alliance like 5 seconds before they reformed, in the hopes of that they would reform within my thing. But it looks like the Austro-Hungarians joined the Allies, and they're fighting against the Central Power. So that's actually kind of good. You know, we don't have to worry about them at all. But the Allies, that's kind of an issue. That's kind of a bother. Hopefully. And would we be able to get them into our alliance back after this? Because the Allies, that's a democratic faction. The Austro-Hungarians, they are, formed by Austria, so they're non-aligned. And but I suppose the non-aligned ideology means that you can just join any faction. I mean, yeah, it does basically mean that, because the non-aligned is basically like a catch-all definition for just not being necessarily aligned with either democratic or the Axis or whatever faction, Okay, Sweden left. Wonderful. I suppose it makes sense, but why would they join in the first place then? That's kind of a strange thing. Already preparing for the inevitable invasion of Turkey, obviously. And yeah, so there we go. This is going to be quite interesting. Hopefully manage to just completely annihilate the Germans here. But we're pushing quite swiftly through Poland, so the help of Austria-Hungary could probably just get this whole thing done in, like, I don't know, a month. That would actually be quite good. You know what? Let's try and get them into our alliance. It's probably going to not work, or maybe, I'm not entirely sure. I guess they... Austria-Hungary accepts. Okay, so we just snatched them. Okay, that's actually pretty decent. I mean, I didn't know that you could just rip someone out from the Allies like this, but that's actually really cool. It does make sense that they would be a little bit more aligned with us, maybe, than with the Allies, because we're immediately on their border. And yeah, so that's actually kind of cool. And the Hungarian part was in the Russian Accords before this, so yeah, so welcome back. That's actually quite good. And let's get this party rolling. Time to take out these two. But they're gonna have to. 118 days. That's gonna be a long time. But I'm not really sure if Germany will even last that long. Maybe we can snatch them up in a peace deal, but yeah, I don't think so. Is the set? Yes! Oh my goodness, that took a very long time. By the gods, that took a very long time. Because, well, we were at first at war with just the Romanians and the Yugoslavians, then we had to go to war with Finland, suddenly the Germans joined, then we declared war on Poland to get to Germany, then the Austro-Hungarians were formed. Very dynamic front. That was a very dynamic front, if I do say so myself. So let's give something, a little something to the Allies, because even though we did basically everything this game, or this match, let's give this to the Austro-Hungarians, the Southern German Confederation, or at least some parts of it. Yeah, I do think they deserve that, because, well, they did do quite a lot of work when it came to distracting the Germans, but everything else, yeah, that's basically mine, because I had like a 70% war participation, something like that. So, yeah, everything else is mine. The Allies did nothing, didn't help me at all. They couldn't even, successfully counterattack the Germans, even though they were basically stagnant on the Western Front. So, yep. Oh, I forgot about Estonia. Well, let's just pretend that we didn't forget about Estonia, and yep, there we go. I mean, all I did was just forget about them, and let's reform, and there we go. Proclaim the Third Rome, or form the Third Rome, or rather, but let's proclaim the Third Rome. Proclaiming stuff is always so much more epic. And what's also epic is this epic lag that the game... Oh, there we go. Nice. I only thought that we just have like a, I don't know, switch of names, but this is actually kind of cool. Even the flag is kind of cool. Ignore that red star in the focus tree. But Latvia is next, and we definitely have to get rid of them, because that's a very... well, sort of an annoying sight to behold within the borders of our glorious Third Roman Empire. There we go, look at those borders, absolutely brilliant. Half the world is within the Russian Accords, and we are completely dominating everyone. We're basically the sole superpower. I mean, the United States doesn't even compare to us right now, so, yeah. Third Rome, absolutely magnificent. Rodzavetsky did it all himself, and all by himself, and there we go. The Italians are actually, pushing it into France, so that's kind of cool. But, well, anyway, thanks for watching, and see you next time.